let's have a chat.
All right, let's do it. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out for the show today.
Absolutely, good to be here.
So let's begin our journey with this. Before we get into your work, 6 years ago, this pandemic changed so much about all of us. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and live today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because sometimes it feels like the pandemic took forever, and sometimes it feels like it never happened. Like we
Yeah.
all went to, back to life as usual, but it did change. So, for me, I think what really changed is that my work became remote, and it has been ever since. And that allowed us. So. I lived in the Seattle city limits, which I loved, but it's a hard place to kind of like buy a house and navigate having a young family. And so the pandemic, while really hard because my daughter was one at the time and it, felt pretty isolating and it was hard to have her, around while we were working from home. Um, because a lot of tech jobs became remote, and I know there's all this discussion about return to office and not, and that's a whole can of worms. But I do think generally the trend went to things being more flexible. So I've been able to have jobs with companies I really love, and be outside of the city limits, and we have horses, and get some wide open spaces, and that's really changed our lives being able to do that.
So let's get into the work that you do. Let's peel back the layers. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds at career day. And one of the kids in the back of the room wants to know what you do for your day job. How do you explain it?
Yeah. So the boring answer is I'm an executive. The fun answer is I get to help people that have really cool ideas build companies that last. And so I've done that across a few different things, across some education companies where helping create really great software for students. I've been part of helping people learn how to code and change their jobs, which is really fun. And now I'm at a National Honor Society where we help with leadership programs. So I didn't really understand what operations was until I was maybe 30, less 13. It didn't sound very interesting, but I really love it. And it's just all about getting people to do their work in the same direction and communicate well and have big goals and remove any roadblocks they have to reaching those.
It's interesting. Seattle is such a fertile playground for so many entrepreneurial titans that exist in the world today. I was interviewing someone, I think it was this time last week. I was interviewing somebody that built a software company um, in California, and one of his employees that he had to let go went to Seattle and was number 7 on the initial launch of Amazon, and talked about how they would put all the books in the hallway, and at the end of the day they would all go out and put them in, take them to the mailbox or take them to UPS. And it was like that early day when it was a bookseller. And I think about how big it is and how many companies from Microsoft to beyond. So my question to you is, do you feel that in the air, like in Silicon Valley when you're up there, that is there's this magnetism that people want to be in Seattle, and there's still this real hardcore entrepreneurial spirit.
I do. I feel like it that oscillates though with like how good the economy is at the
Yeah.
time. So I've definitely a lot of my career, even if I've been in Seattle or been in New York, there's Silicon Valley and the Bay Area is always kind of a hub. And so you're either on a plane traveling there once in a while or you're there.
Yeah.
There are places for a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is tied to the ability to raise money. And that is still a crazy thing to me that people go and ask investors for like millions of dollars and they get money to do that. Even though I've been in business for a long time, I think it requires a big belief in yourself and your ability to grow something to like have the chutzpah to ask for a big investment. So I think right now we're in a period where a lot of those entrepreneurs that would like to have funding and like to have some investment money, it's a tight time to do that. So a lot of people are kind of like buckling down and waiting to see what's going to happen. But as far as like people just being free with their nerdy ideas, like whatever the economy is, that's definitely in the air here, and that's a lot of fun.
Well, that's what happened with this story. He was approached by this old employee that said, if you invest $100,000, there's this really smart guy named Jeff that runs the company, and I think it's going to go places. And he didn't do it. And he calculated if he would have done it, how much he would have made off that initial investment. It was like billions.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so hard to know, right?
Yeah.
Because Jeff turned out to be Jeff Bezos, but he could have turned out to be like a not very hard worker down the
Yeah.
street, right? So it's really hard to there are times too I've kicked myself for not investing in things, not as big as Amazon, but looking back and saying, "Oh, with all the information I have, that was such an obvious decision."
Yeah.
But it's not at the time, so it's
No.
really hard to know.
Yeah. Well, and you got all the market forces too. I mean, we're definitely in a time in America where a lot of things are in flux and there's
Yes.
no guarantees like there may have been 5, 10 years ago. Um,
Yes.
so when you were in that room at Career Day thinking about your life, what was the career, the job, the dream job that you wanted to have?
I thought that I was going to either work for the FBI or the State Department. Um,
Okay.
and ended up doing something very different than that. So when I would have been that age at Career Day, I really had a sense of public service and like wanting to do a career where I felt like I was helping others. And so I kind of thought, okay, maybe a job in government or policy, something where I'm helping folks. And I went on to study political science and economics in college. So that kind of aligned with those future career goals. And then my senior year in college, I was contacted by an organization called Teach for America, which is kind of like the Peace Corps, but you go within the United States and you teach in a low income school and you commit to doing that for 2 years. And so they contacted me to recruit other students for that program. And then I ended up recruiting myself. And so I ended up going and becoming a teacher in Oakland and California for a few years. And that was definitely a life-changing experience and something that completely changed my career goals because I got to do something for 2 years that felt really, really important. Like teaching a seventh grader how to do algebra is a big predictor of whether or not they'll be able to graduate high school
Yeah.
and, their prospects in life. And so I had in the years after kind of a push and pull between what did I think I was going to do, and then what am I genuinely interested in, and kind of like redevelop that over time. After Teach for America, I did a master's degree in London, and then I met a guy. That's a whole other story. He's my husband now, so it worked. But I met a guy in London, and we moved to Hong Kong together. And so I had a couple of different kind of odd jobs that I hadn't expected to have, and then went back in the classroom again for a period. And then in New York in the early 2010s, I got hired into an education technology company called General Assembly. And it was really interesting because they hired me because I had been a teacher and they didn't have very many people that had been in education. And so I was brought into this whole world of like startup money, and they were building a coding boot camp. And it was really exciting to see the speed at which things moved.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy to see how much money was spent on things that, we wouldn't have had access to like in a public school. But it's really my teaching background that led me into tech, strangely enough. And then I've been helping grow companies ever since. So very different career, like similar values to what I had when I was 13, but very similar or very different career than what I ever thought I would be doing.
Yeah. So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Corvallis, Oregon, so
Okay.
where Oregon State is.
Okay. So take me back to your beginnings. What made you want to get into a high level government agency and then eventually teach, travel, come back, and be involved with helping people kind of harvest their ideas? How did all of this begin?
Yeah. I think growing up, so I grew up in a pretty small town, but it was a small college town. So there was always a lot of access to like interesting ideas, and we had an engineering school, agriculture school. So I saw a lot of people inventing around me, and also people in that environment like having career goals that did have something kind of to do with giving back, whether it was like creating great food for people, or building a safe medical device. So I grew up in a small town, but there were a lot of tracks where I saw folks could go. And then I also my dad was in tech. Back in the day, Hewlett Packard had a bunch of sites like outside of the main city hubs. So they had a chip fab that was in this small 50,000 person town, and a bunch of people moved to the town to work there. So I kind of had this access to tech and this idea of um, people with big ideas doing interesting things, which was really fortunate. In high school, ended up being one of the first like online homeschooled students in the country. So I was really into horses at the time, and well, still am. But I spent a lot of time at the barn, a lot of time doing chores, and a lot of time training for competitions, and looked up online and said, "Hey, I could actually be doing my schoolwork in like 2 hours a day here." And I like my school friends, but I really like my barn friends, and so I kind of brought a proposal to my parents, and I said, "Hey, if my grades are good and I graduate well, can I just do this instead of being in public high school?" We had a good enough internet connection that it worked. It was kind of like the evolution of the correspondence school at the time.
Yeah.
And they agreed to it. So I had this like my last 3 years of high school where I really got to self-study. I got to explore a lot of things I was really interested in, but it was within enough boundaries that I also like got a high school diploma and, was able to show good grades from that. Um, and so I guess that kind of it took me a long time to feel like I integrated into what people my age were doing. And that kind of merged in college, where when I went to college, I was still very interested in like the horse stuff and training for a sport, but I think you also just find a lot more different people who are interested in different things compared to wherever your local high school is. And so I just got to be around a lot of people with really interesting different interests. And I went to the University of Oregon, which is about an hour away from my hometown. And there's a lot of kind of social justice consciousness in Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah.
And that was a good fit for me and very exciting. So I think that kind of really led me to thinking about, sure, money is important. You want to be able to like have a family and a good place to live. But I was also really motivated by trying to find work that felt meaningful to me. And that's where initially kind of that idea of government service took root.
So sometimes it takes a while for us to find the right fit, professionally speaking. Who has been that inspirational force from the word go for you that's allowed you to navigate through your life, to find where you belong, to find your true calling?
Yeah. I think there are two major forces there. So one was my grandmother, who I'm sure from the time I was one, although I can't remember, was like, we're all going to get master's degrees. That's what we do in this family, right? Education's important. And she always had all these aspirations for all of myself and my cousins of just like holding a high bar. Not to say that my parents did it, but I think didn't. But I think because it was my grandmother and she wasn't the person that you argued with, it was just like, grandma says we're doing this, I guess we're doing this. And so that's always a good reminder to me of like, if you have someone that has high standards for you and believes in you, that has a lot more to do with your success than how smart you are
Yeah.
or um, I think it's a huge predictor of what you'll be able to do is just having that person. So she was always that person, and she often suggested careers that didn't really sound great to me, but they were always like, you'll go to school and you can do this. And that was great. But then I think in terms of like finding my own professional footing, the biggest people in my life were my students in that first year that I was teaching. Um, I really kind of had to redefine like what I thought leadership was and like what my role would be in that. So I was in a Title I school, so pretty low income school in Oakland. Wonderful families, horrible resources. I was 23 years old and I had 35 kids to one in each of my classes, and no teacher's aide or anything. I had had 6 weeks of training. It was good training, but it was 6 weeks of training.
Yeah.
And so, the first couple of weeks, like my class was super out of control. Kids, I'd forget to like sign them in for hall passes, and I'd have 10 kids out at a time, and the resource specialist would come by and be like, your kids need to come back in the class, right? It's just a whole mess. I didn't know what I was doing. And so that took a lot of reflection of, I really want to be good at this because I know that teaching is really important and I don't want to mess up these kids' education. Like nothing I've ever done in business has felt as high stakes as not messing up these kids' seventh grade year. And so I looked around me at like the other teachers that were successful, and they were so different. So like there was one teacher who um, had just been there for like 15 years. She knew the kids and the families. I think she had come from somewhere in the Midwest, but she totally integrated herself into this like Latino community in Oakland, and I really respected that. There was another guy across the hall who had great classroom management. He would like roast the kids. So he was like a local black guy from Oakland. He was hilarious, but he also like, had a line that they didn't cross, right? And so his classroom was really fun, really in control. And he also just had like local jokes and slang and things that if I had tried those with the kids, they would have been like, forget you, lady. Like
Yeah,
this is the most fake thing we've ever seen, right?
yeah,
But it worked for him.
yeah,
So I had to kind of think about, okay, well, what can I do that's authentic that helps show the kids respect and helps create an environment where I am a leader so that they can learn. And so looking back to actually all that time spent with like horses and animals and being in a small town, like the things I know how to do, I know how to not scare critters. I know how to stay calm, right? Like I would be the person on the Titanic getting people into the lifeboats. I probably wouldn't be trying to re-engineer the, patching the hole, but
yeah,
I could guide the people. And so it was really interesting because by the end of my second year, especially, my classroom management was really good. Like it was a really pleasant place to be.
yeah,
And if you looked at my friend John across the hall, like his classroom was super fun and the kids were roasting the teacher and back and forth. And then in mine, it was like soft music playing while they were writing. And
yeah,
like, I shook their hands coming in the door every morning. And so that was such a good lesson for like thinking about as I went through the rest of my career, not trying to be someone who didn't feel authentic. So kind of
mhm,
letting go of like, who do we think a leader is? Is it a bombastic CEO? Like, I don't actually have to be that to be
yeah,
effective.
yeah.
So that was a long answer, but they taught me a lot.
Yeah, no, I get it, and that's great. That's a good look into how you grew and figured out your way in the professional world. So let me ask you this. You come from this land of tech giants and companies that have just taken over the landscape. If you can meet one of those CEOs of those companies, whether it's in Seattle or anywhere else, whether they're alive or they're ghosts, who would you love to have talked to that might help you in your understanding and your journey?
I would love to meet I'd love to meet Saul Khan that created Khan Academy.
Yeah,
Because I think that he grew something that continues to reach so many people. That's really simple. I
yeah,
mean, the first things, they didn't build like a really fancy software, right? It was like him with an iPad slowly explaining things. And I think I would just love to kind of pick his brain about what did it look like for you? Like, were you pushed to take a lot of money? Were you pushed to try and make this something that it wasn't because they stuck to something that was so simple and so effective, and didn't kind of like muddy what their product is. And I think that's actually really hard to do
yeah,
because whenever you have a good idea in tech, you have a lot of people, if it's a good market, you have a lot of people who want to invest and say, well, I want that $1 billion payout. So make me a 10-layer software product, right? And I think Khan Academy has been so simple because they kept it really simple. And I want to know, like, how do you keep that vision even when you have all these folks probably around you saying, ooh, you have this many users, you should really go for profit and you should really have this subscription model.
yeah.
Um, so I would love to have a coffee with him.
I think Amazon's kind of done the same thing. The look hasn't changed. It's pretty straightforward. Everything's been pretty standard for, I don't know, since they've turned into a global marketplace. They've always looked the same and kind of operated the same way. I think that's good. There's so many companies that just switch it up. Like Apple always has to update and refresh their iOS and do these things, and it's like it worked fine. It was totally fine. But that's just what they do. I mean, there's certain
Yeah.
companies that's their vision. That's how they roll, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good point. Like with Apple, what is my husband's a software developer. What does he call it? Forced obsolescence, right? Where they
Uh-huh.
they just push new features to push new features, and then the thing you bought 4 years ago doesn't work.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of Amazon's customer pages are like kind of janky,
Yeah.
but you know how to navigate to them. And
Yeah.
I get the sense that like unless data tells them to fix it, they don't,
Yeah.
which is a really great way to run a business. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly it's worked for them, but it is funny how you see like old furniture and stuff in the
Yeah.
Amazon office, and
Uh-huh.
people see that as a point of pride, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is totally. So let me ask you this. What is the energy for you to help your clients reach the heights they're dreaming of, take care of your own soul? All of this when the alarm clock goes off in the morning, what is that energy for you to do all of this at a high level?
Yeah, I think I have a sense of being really blessed to be able to spend my time doing work that I love. And I've realized that that doesn't always mean a job. It can mean like different types of work. But when I get to executive coach someone and see them like grow into the leader they wanted to be, that's incredible. When I get to partner with an entrepreneur who is maybe a visionary and needs like a right-hand person to get the trains running on time, I find a lot of joy in that because it's like, oh, I really got to help enable this person with a big idea. I helped get it out into the world.
Hmm.
And that is so satisfying. And I had some, I call it light cancer because it could have been a lot tougher, but I had a um, routine appendectomy that they found a tumor in my appendix
Wow.
from having appendicitis, and I had a partial colon removal, and luckily that was it. But it's like if I hadn't had that appendicitis, I probably wouldn't be alive. And so,
Wow.
I do think that we all have moments like that, but I try to remember how that brings a sweetness to life, and like that ability to feel joy is so connected to these are the days that we have.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that don't have the opportunity to wake up and do work that they love.
Yeah.
And so really trying to just cherish that brings a lot of happiness to my days and a lot of energy.
So let's say you have a dream tonight and you run into an 18-year-old version of you and you walk into a room and there's a film projector and you click play and there's a 60-second highlight reel of this life you've lived, the choices you've made, how it all played out. Would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
I think they would believe it. I think they would see themselves in the future Chelsea, but they'd be surprised at the road it took
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
there. Um, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you're in the business world. There's a lot in the business world where people don't get to know each other as well as they could. So if you were to be in a room of everybody that's known you in a business sense throughout your career, and you could go to a podium and tell them a fun story about you, maybe the first concert you went to, maybe jumping out of an airplane, maybe a magical place that you traveled to, some fun story that would humanize you a little bit to that room of business minds, what story, fun story would you tell that room?
Mm. I feel like a lot of my humanizing stories are actually the tougher things
Yeah.
that happened that maybe folks didn't see.
Yeah.
Um, but I can share, like during the pandemic, one of the most fun things that my husband and I did were we learned to play couch co-op video games together.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like not hidden on purpose, but a lot of people wouldn't necessarily peg me as like a gamer.
Right.
But it was so fun for us. We did these like RPG games like Baldur's Gate and just spent hours and hours. And that was actually pretty delightful to have that time together. And
Yeah.
you learn a lot about your partner by how they respond to a
Uh-huh.
video game
Yeah.
challenge.
Yes. That's interesting. So, of everything that you've done, accomplished, and evolved to, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
I am I'm proudest of being able to navigate into a career that feels more like a path and less like a series of check boxes. And what I mean more specifically is like when I was younger, it was go to college, get the master's degree, get the PhD, maybe work for the State Department, right? Like I had a very set view, and um, having the freedom to be able to say, okay, I know I have these skills. Right now, I'm working at this tech company. 2 years from now, I might be working on something totally different with folks, but I'm still using those skills. Um, that's definitely something that I'm proud of. Was that your original question?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Hmm. Um, I think I'm calm but tough. I think that is, and that's something that I am an executive I'm not super bombastic, right? I'm not afraid to tell and, push back on things, but I actually had an interview recently where I had to reflect on this because I interviewed for a COO role, and recently got a contract for it, so it worked out. But during the interview process, the CEO was like, just a little piece of feedback. We're worried that you won't push back enough on us. And I was like, really? Like, I'm too affable and this is a problem. But when I got to know them more, I was like, hey, like I'm the person who was in inner city schools being calm when everything was chaotic. Like I'm the farm person who a huge horse could be running at me and I'm not going to move because I know it's going to go around me. And so just like having that confidence to say, I'm calm, I'm not a pushover. You might not get that because I might not fit the first impression of what you would think a leader is supposed to be.
Yeah. So, who would be a client at this point right now? Who would be the ideal person, client to reach out to you to take that idea and move forward?
Yeah, I would say someone who is an entrepreneur or a visionary who has started their company and realizes that the reason they started their company is not what they're doing every day. So I think most people who are entrepreneurs don't start companies because they want to manage a bunch of people. They don't start companies because they want to create KPIs. They want to create customer success dashboards. That is like my love language. I love doing all of those things. And I love freeing up entrepreneurs to help to protect that time of them being visionaries. Someone who kind of feels their entrepreneurial spirit slipping away in the business they've started because they're overwhelmed, that's a person who I would love to reach out to and see if I can support them.
So, how do they do that? Where's the good business? Where do they go? How do they reach out?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn, I'm Chelsea Byers. Jump Point Consulting is also my consulting page. And then I'm also on Substack. So just encourage people. I have a free newsletter. Folks can sign up, add their email. I send an essay about work and life about once a week or share podcast episodes. And that's also a great way to direct message too. So if folks want to know more about how I'm thinking, or have some thought exercises, Substack's a great place. If you just want to connect directly, LinkedIn's a perfect place to do that.
Okay.
And there's a big picture of Matt Rainier on the back of my profile, so I'm that Chelsea Byers.
All right. Excellent. I will put all these links in the show notes. Chelsea, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Yeah.